Yes, it's Sunday night, and it's time for the Sunday Night Bible Forum. We haven't called it that in a long, long time. We just call it the Bible Forum now because, well, it just sort of changes. It's been a little hectic here at the home front, here on the ranch, as we try to get this thing started. Maybe you were tuned in earlier. I was letting it run so you could see that we are coming, and then chaos ensued. And I dropped something, and then I made a mistake, and we had to start all over. Anyway, this is April 9. It's Palm Sunday. Did you celebrate Palm Sunday? That's what we do in Christendom. We're going to talk about a lot of that tonight. It's going to take up a great deal of the program, in large part because of the chaos that ensues, swirls around our Easter celebration. We're also going to be talking about the world and some of the things that have happened, are happening, might happen, things of that nature. We'll look at some of the things that are going on with young people today, how to raise productive children. There are, believe it or not, people in this world who are able to do that. And so we'll have a little peek at some of that. We have all of the doings in Syria and the Russians and the Chinese and the North Koreans and all of that swirling around us, and so we'll talk a little bit about that. Sudan has put 25 churches on notice that their buildings are on government land. They got to go away. We'll talk a little bit about that. But mostly we'll talk doctrine tonight. Then we'll talk about 21st century young people. What is at stake in our world? What's really, really going on? What's going on with this wire that runs down the back of my neck is going to drive me crazy all night long if I'm not careful. It just keeps pulling at me, and I haven't figured out yet a way to fix that. You see on my right, your left, I guess, as you're looking at it over on that side, the books. You need to go to the website, thebibleforum.net. You click the links and you see the same images, and you click the images and it takes you where you can buy those books. And I would love for you to have them. If you can't afford it, I'd give it to you. But, you know, we're a capitalist society. If you can afford it, you ought to buy it. If you want, you can email me. I've got some here, and I'll be glad to send them out to you. But you can get them fresh. You can get them from the Amazon.com. I mean, there's a lot of different things you can do. One of them explains not just the gospel, but how it works and why it's working, and then the implications and all of that in terms of application, something that you need. If you're a Christian, you need to know this stuff, and you need to have this in your quiver. You need to come prepared when you talk to people about the Lord with a solid doctrinal footing. And the other one just talks about the history of Christendom, beginning at the beginning and working through generations, thousands of years, the last two at least, and showing you the attack of Satan upon the church. And the hint here, giving away the whole subtext, is the fact that it's always the same. It's no different today than it's ever been. It takes different forms, but it's always the same thing. The attack is on the doctrine, and specifically the doctrine of soteriology, the doctrine of salvation. And of course, you would know that that's the doctrine in question because you've been taking the courses at the Bible Institute, Bible Institute of Charleston.com. You need to take the courses. You're part of my loyal audience. You need to take the courses. There's nothing there. There's nobody beats you over the head. You got to study and take a test, and you need the material. So you need to go to the website, thebibleforum.net, or just go directly to charlestonbibleinstitute.org and sign up. It's not expensive. And you will get a video in your inbox every other Monday morning, if I don't forget. And you watch the videos. You get to hang on to them for a while. You don't get to keep them. Once you've had them and digested them and you finish the course, then they go away. But you have the information doctrine. I started teaching Sunday school today at a church, and one of the things, once we get away from the Easter thrust here, one of the things I want to do is to impress upon them the need to understand Bible doctrine, to understand how to read the Bible. And it's not complicated. You read the Bible the same way you read the newspaper. You know, nobody picks up a newspaper and reads about Syria and gassing their citizens and thinks about Pinocchio. Nobody does that. Why not? Because they use a system of interpretation that doesn't take them there. And you need to know that, so that when you are reading the Bible and somebody comes along and says, hey, you know what that means? It means this is not really that. So you can, whoa, 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 whoa. If it says Galilee, it doesn't mean Smyrna. It's just that simple. It's written down for that purpose, and there are rules that govern the way we interpret the written word. You need to understand that. Put that in your little arsenal, your quiver, so that when you're talking to people, you're not at a loss. This was a fascinating week in the world. Government agents in Sudan are telling Christians who belong to an estimated 25 churches that their buildings are on government land, and they are going to be demolished. Apparently, even if they're not really on government land. How do I know? Because they've already done it. Authorities bulldozed a Lutheran church in Sudan, never giving them any warning. Local authorities just came in, said the church is built on land that was allocated for business, and they tore it down. Government agents destroyed a 600 worshiper Sudanese Church of Christ to take the land for low-cost housing. That stuff doesn't happen in the United States of America, does it? Not yet. There was an election recently in a little town in Missouri called Ferguson. You remember Ferguson, Missouri? A new mayor has been elected in Ferguson. This is the town of the gentle giant. The young man who was shot down by a black man who was shot down by a white police officer who had his hands in the air shouting, "Don't shoot, don't shoot." A town that boasts a black population that is in the 60+ percentile. The town is more than 60% black, and they have just elected a white mayor. A mayor who received more than 50% of the votes cast. Isn't that amazing? We had men in the upper echelons of our federal government in Ferguson stimulating, stirring people up. The media was putting out on a steady stream that lie that this was about race. And here we are. Amazing, isn't it? Now, it's not. This sort of thing occurs naturally, often, all throughout the United States. It's only on TV and in the halls of Congress or among the Hollywood types that we hear how white people routinely hate black people. Just this week, I saw two. One was a commercial and the other was a testimony, video, of small white children who either had a best friend that was black, or one little girl had a doll baby that was black, wanted to buy this thing, a little tiny kid, and the girl at the counter was trying to talk her out of it. And she says, no. She says, it looks just like me. Look, same hair, same smile, everything. She's beautiful. It isn't a routine thing for white people to go around just hating people because they're a different color. It doesn't happen like that. Maybe it happens in your world. But in the real world, it isn't like that. If our media, our sports teams, our TV personalities, Hollywood industry were being fair, only one out of every dozen or so faces that we see would be black. But it's not like that, is it? It's almost 50-50. It's at least 40%. But America is racist at heart. Everybody knows that. Just recently, in the last week or so, some Delaware state representatives walked out of the room at their state house when two Muslims were called upon to pray in an open session to begin their session. What's the problem with that? Well, some of it concerned the prayer, although these folks didn't hear much of it. But mostly it concerns the concept. Political meetings such as this have always been opened with prayer. But it was prayer to the God who raised up this country, to the one and only God of the universe. These men were praying to a God who wants to dominate this country and the world. A God who advocates the subjugation of women and children, not to mention any and all who actively reject him and or his teachings. Here's part of what this prayer consisted of. They prayed, God, meaning Allah, who, even though it be against yourselves or your parents or your kin, be he rich or poor, God, Allah, is a better protector to both than you, meaning that elected body and their families. So do not follow the lusts of your heart, lest you may avoid justice. And if you distort your witness or refuse to give it, verily God, Allah, is ever well acquainted with what you do. Now, it wasn't too insulting nor demeaning, unless you understand who this God is and what he represents and what the hidden message is in this prayer. Allah is the family god of Muhammad, the moon god. In the days of Muhammad, there was a god for every day in the year. Their repose was in the Kaaba in Mecca, 360 some of these. When Muhammad established his religion in response to a fearful set of messages he received in a cave, things that frightened him to death, first thing he did was to remove all those other gods. And those who refused to bow before his God were killed. He then went on a crusade to convert the entire world, not through a gospel of love and mercy and peace, but with a Quran and with a sword. Allah is not a God who loves his people. He is not a God who died for the sins of his people. He is not a God who expresses himself in prophecy, indicating his eternality. There's no prophetic word in the Quran or in Islam. He's not a God who uplifts all people with a message of love and acceptance. Rather, he's a God of wrath. He's a God of do what I want or you die. Oh, and except for a few religious behaviors and a rigid dress and behavior code, he does not tell his subjects what he wants from them. They merely have to go about the business of guessing as to what would be the right thing to do. And if it isn't the right thing to do, and they do get judged or they do get punished, inshallah, what will be, will be. The Quran is a compilation of rambling surahs, 40 to 60% of which are almost copied word for word from the Old Testament scriptures. In short, he's not a God anything like the one true God of the Bible. However, foolish, ignorant, godless men are trying to make him equal to the God of the Bible, in part by showing respect and treating him like Jehovah, a far greater respect than this God has ever shown anybody else. So these men walked out, and now these men are the problem, as are I now, who will receive more hate mail from these followers of Allah. One wonders why this God needs so much protection. Can he not take care of himself? Oh, Islam is good. I'm the bad guy. In light of the comments that I have made regarding Muslims, my characterizations and so forth, I'm the bad guy. But over in Australia, there's a fellow by the name of Mufis Rahman. He's a 20-year-old. He's charged with sodomizing a child. His defense is that child rape is, quote, culturally acceptable, end of quote, in his homeland of Myanmar, and therefore he should get a free pass. Susan Rice is in the news. You've probably seen her, heard about her. She's talking about the idea that the Russians interfered with our election. She called it a phony scandal. The truth is, this whole thing was perpetrated by the Obama White House to make it appear the Russians sought to influence our elections, when in reality, the Democrats did all that. And it's slowly making its way out. They wanted our president, our new president, to be under a cloud and to have something to distract him and to keep the public busy with stuff that they couldn't identify or couldn't, put their finger on. But he's a crook, he's a criminal, look what he did. Turns out they were the ones doing it. Our former governor, Nikki Haley, is now an ambassador for the United States at the United Nations. On the floor of the United Nations, she spoke regarding Syria's gassing of civilians, including children. These people bombed civilian population, women and children. And when rescuers came in and began to try to help these people, they came back to bomb the places where the people were being treated. Islam. Haley then looked at the Russian ambassador to the UN and asked, quote, "How long, Mr. Ambassador, will Russia continue to support Assad?" That's a tough lady. We apparently shot off a bunch of missiles, rockets, this week. And our president went before the media to explain what was going on. He did it with the King of Jordan standing next to him last week. He did it this week with the Chinese premier. He routinely has to go after the media to try to help them understand what is right, what is wrong, what is a story, how much he's going to say, when he's going to say it, and the rest of it. He actually got to the place this week where he said, "Do you really think I'm going to tell you anything?" He could have added, "I'm not Obama," because that was the kind of thing they were used to. In the Obama administration, they would kind of explain what they were going to telegraph, the kinds of things that we're going to do. Not happening here. It wasn't long after that exchange that the United States Navy launched their attack upon this airbase where the gas attacks originated in Syria. 59 Tomahawk missiles. And the thing that fascinated me was they were able to shoot them all off over a period of about 45 minutes and have the first few, each one loiter in a preconceived pattern for that entire time, almost an hour, until the group was assembled over the airfield. And then they turned them loose. And then it was that hell came down to earth on the people who were there. Now, our president notified Syria, notified the people involved that it was going to happen an hour before it did. Get your people out. We don't want to hurt anybody, but we're going to take out these gas supplies and we're going to render your airfield and your airplanes as much as we can to rubble. We're told that 5 adults and 4 children died in that less than 3-minute attack. And inquiring minds want to know, why were those people still there? Oh, and as President Trump ratchets up the U.S. military in his latest budget proposal, Russia claims to have created a devastating hypersonic missile that travels 5 times faster than the speed of sound, 4,600 miles an hour. And according to them, this missile can rip through a Navy warship's defenses because it's so fast nobody could stop it. They claim to have it ready by 2020. I'm sure the U.S. Navy is shaking in their boots. Does anybody remember the political cartoons of the 1950s? Not too many of us around. I didn't fully understand them, but they were there routinely. And routinely we saw the characterization of Russian leaders, represented always as having a great big star on their coats. And they would have medals and other things hanging from, and they would have the word hero on there, the hero of the Soviet whatever. Why? Well, because everything they do is bigger and better than yours. And apparently that's still the way they think. It wasn't until much later, in the 80s and 90s, that we began to learn that during the 1950s and the 1960s, our government knew that Russia was on the verge of collapse. They were not the political and military powerhouse they wanted the world to believe. We knew that. Didn't bother us, whatever they wanted to do. Do you download music onto some device or another? The music industry is struggling today, in part because more and more folks are downloading rather than purchasing. Nobody's going out and buying a CD much anymore. Streaming is making it quicker not only to play the music, but according to a new study, finds that pop songs themselves are getting faster. They're increasing because listeners' attention spans are diminishing. Instrumental openings to songs have shrunk dramatically over the last 3 decades. And to a lesser extent, the average tempo of hit singles has been speeded up. Herbert Level-Gauvin, I guess he's French, I don't know, a doctoral student in music theory at The Ohio State University, analyzed the year-end top 10 on the U.S. Billboard chart between 1986 and 2015. In 86, it took roughly 23 seconds before the voice began on the average hit song. Today, about 5 seconds. That's a drop of about 78%. We can't even wait for the instrumental so that we can hear the music. Got to get right to it. An Israeli company whose technology made a splash this past week is called AIPAC. Now I take that back. It happened at the AIPAC conference, at AIPAC, something like that. Now, Israel's a bad country. Israel's got to go. Israel is just terrible. You know how Israel is. The world just wants her to go away. Well, Israel has signed deals with India and with Vietnam to produce drinking water for them by extracting it from the air. These are 2 countries that face water shortages. They're hot countries. A company by the name of WaterGen inked an agreement last week with India's second largest solar company to produce purified water for remote villages in that country. Earlier, the company arranged with the Hanoi government to set up water generators in the Vietnamese capital. But Israel's a terrible, terrible person, country, whatever. Have you seen the latest scandal? Cadbury, the candy producer, has been accused by the Archbishop of York, Dr. John Sentamu, of, quote, spitting on the grave, end of quote, of its Christian founder by removing the word Easter from an annual egg hunt. Previously called the Easter Egg Trail, the nationwide event for children is returning as the Great British Egg Hunt this year. The Archbishop said, to drop Easter from Cadbury's Easter egg hunt, in my book, is tantamount to spitting on the grave of Mr. Cadbury. If people visited Birmingham today in the Cadbury world, they would discover how Cadbury's Christian faith influenced his industrial output. He built houses for all his workers. He built a church. He made provision for schools. It is obvious that for him, Jesus and justice were two sides of the one coin. The fact that Easter is not technically a Christian holiday shouldn't interfere with anybody. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Do you know Netflix's History of America? They've announced plans to release their first major animated feature film. It's called America, the Motion Picture. Oh, it's going to be R-rated. It's also going to have a revisionist history tale about the founding of the country. I don't know what the R rating is. The implication is it was for sex. I told you last week how that Argentina and Venezuela were coming unglued. It seems the whole of Central and South America is coming unglued. A series of election protesters turned dangerously violent in Paraguay this past Friday night. Protesters stormed Congress building in the capital city of Asuncion, ransacking the offices of government office holders and setting fire to the buildings. At least one protester has been killed in the violence after being shot with a rubber bullet fired by police and sustaining an unspecified blow to the head. The violence erupted after one chamber of Paraguay's government voted in secret to amend its constitution to allow current President Horacio Cartes to run for re-election. Apparently that's not permitted. The damage to Paraguay's Congress building was substantial, and the fire was reported to have raged for almost 2 hours before it was finally extinguished. President Cartes has called for peace, but the situation in Paraguay remains tense.